Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. I am Darren Light, joined as always by my co-host Greg Scully. Today, we are joined by our partner in business and good friend Kevin Gardner with Multifamily Utility Solutions. And there's a lot that goes into Multifamily Utility Solutions, but we're going to get right to it and let Kevin introduce himself. And then we'll just start with some questions. Kevin, we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast with you guys.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool because, I mean, I think we were just talking before we started recording, how we've known each other now 4 or 5 years from when my company was small and you guys were each independent and kind of working on your own. Back at in Knoxville, what was that, 4 years ago, maybe?
It's a while ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Approximately.
And how we've gotten to this point. So it's exciting. I mean, I love to see the growth, not only my own, but with what you guys are doing, it's awesome. So yeah, Multifamily Utility Solutions, just like it sounds, utility solutions. We help multifamily property owners try and increase NOI. And we can do that a lot of different ways. Our specialty really, though, is the telecommunications contracts, cable and internet, because a lot of people just don't realize that you, as the property owner, you're kind of the gatekeeper there for those companies that want to provide service to your residents. And a lot of people don't realize that. So, let's say a cable company will pick Comcast in Knoxville, Tennessee, just to pick out a random market. When they get a franchise from the cable company, that gives them the right to be on the public easements. And let's say, Greg, you owned a home there and you sign up for their service. You, the homeowner, are giving them permission to be on your property, right? Because they're bringing facilities into your location. Well, the difference is in multifamily, you're the gatekeeper because your resident who's signing up for the service doesn't own the property and therefore can't give them the right to be on your property. So the cable company needs what's called an easement or an access agreement from you that allows them to service your residents. And there's value there, right? What if you said no? How many customers would they, possibly have to forego? Or if there's multiple, providers in a market, right? You got Comcast, maybe WOW's in there too, or CenturyLink or AT&T. And so that's where we step in and we do all the research and we find out what are our options here. And you might think that, the cable company's already in there. And that's true in most cases. But what's also true is they've been in there for a while, and whatever piece of paper they had, grant of easement or anything like that early on, and oftentimes it wasn't recorded because, 20, 30 years ago when some of these properties were built, they didn't record those things. Or the cable company's been sold or the property's been sold numerous times and nobody knows where it is. So there's no record of it. So we got to kind of start from scratch. And that's the real opportunity, to go out and generate some revenue for the property owner.
You've been in this business 20 plus years. You had to start with one of the big companies. Tell us more about how you got to where you are. What prompted Multifamily Utility Solutions? Just kind of that little journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey. I was actually with Comcast, and believe it or not, I started off in door-to-door sales. I was knocking doors, and just to show you how maybe my judgment's gotten better over the years, I started in December in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in a snowstorm. So yeah, welcome to and I thought it was gonna be a cool job though, because my sales manager at the time, he's like, hey, so you're a golfer, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, let me give you a tip. When you're going door to door, take a golf ball with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, take the golf ball out of your pocket and knock on the doors with the golf ball so you don't kill your knuckles. So,
So you're gonna be knocking on a lot of doors if you're worried about like knuckle.
Yeah. So that was my introduction, and I did well, and that was early, and I just gradually worked my way up. I moved around the country, and kept getting promotions and going into tough situations and turning them around. And I was there as Comcast grew. And, you know, at a certain point, I was in Michigan. I was a area vice president for Comcast up there. And, you know, it just got to be too bureaucratic for me. I mean, God love them. They're doing great. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm some of my friends are still there and everything, but it just I love that entrepreneurial stuff, right? And so I went out and I started my own company. And my company started initially as a way to connect cable companies with third-party vendors, people that would do their contract installations or contract construction or anybody that they use for outside services. And then as these cable companies got larger, that pool shrunk. And then I started doing some competitive analysis under a different umbrella, a different DBA. And that led to Spectrum, actually at the time they were still Charter, asking me to start another area of my business to help them negotiate with multifamily owners. So they contracted out to us, and we had Comcast and Spectrum as our clients initially. And then they took that all in-house. They wanted to do it with just employees and not use outside services and things like that. And so we were like, well, we know this business so well, why don't we represent the owners? And so that's kind of how it evolved into that. So, you know, it's kind of like our friends Jake and Gino, right? I mean, the Honeybee book, where they talk about take your core competency and then build off of that, and let one business, you know, go into another and go into another and expand, you know, along your areas where you know the business. And that's kind of what we did. And so now Multifamily Utility Solutions takes up 80-90% of my time, because that's, you know, that's the one that's grown, and that's the one that right now in this marketplace has the most benefit to the most people. So yeah, so that it's been a crazy journey. Never saw this when I was an accounting major in college. Never saw this being the outcome, but grateful that it is. It's awesome.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know it really exists. We certainly didn't. I mean, we are a client of yours, so thank you for that. We get some mailbox money, but I don't think people realize that there is. And let's define what kind of happens. So you're as an owner, I'm able to provide a service to my tenants cheaper than what they would get if they went to the provider directly. That's potentially the upside to them. The upside to us is some residual income for signing an exclusive agreement with a singular company. Is that roughly it?
That's roughly it, but that's only half of it.
Okay.
Okay. So there are two types of agreements. One is a non-bulk or right of access agreement. And in that situation, you are giving the cable company or telephone company or whoever it is the right to be on your property, the right to service your residents, and they are paying you for the right to do that. Now, in many cases, you may be giving them exclusive uses of wiring, exclusive marketing rights, where you're going to promote them. And in exchange for that, they're going to share revenue with you in most cases, and or maybe give you a one-time upfront fee called a door fee, lump sum payment at the time you sign. That's one situation, and that's the one where your residents are paying individually.
Okay.
The other thing you described is a bulk agreement, and that's where you, as the owner, buy service from the cable company in bulk. So if you've got 100 units, you may not pay the full retail rate, you'd pay a lower rate, and you could either include it in your rent or have it as an amenities rider or some addendum or anything like that. In that situation, there's some liabilities that go with that. First of all, you are liable for 100% of your units every month, regardless of whether they're occupied, regardless of whether or not the person wants it. So you're on the hook for all those. The upside is if you're buying service for $40 a month that's got a value of 70, and you can take that additional, spread there, that markup could generate you more NOI, but there's more work on your end and there's more liability, right? Because you're on the hook. And there was a growing trend when the COVID hit a little bit. People were starting to look at that bulk, and then all of a sudden they kind of pulled back. I don't know if I want that liability. Why don't we just go with the right of entry and let the residents pay for whatever they want to pay for? I don't want to be on the hook for, $4,000 a month, incremental. Maybe I can make 7, but maybe I can't. So there was some uncertainty. So you know what? Each situation is different. Each owner has different, interests, different business goals. And that's why the first thing we do is we talk to our clients and say, what are you doing here? Are you, are you buying and fixing up and holding? Are you buying and flipping? What are your goals here? And then we discuss the options and let them decide which one's best for them. If you're in a real competitive marketplace and it's hard to get people in, maybe the amenity is worth it. If you have no trouble whatsoever, and you've got a lot else on your plate, maybe you don't want to take on that, extra work of tracking that and everything like that. So, so those are the two primary options.
And go ahead, Darren.
As Greg mentioned earlier, we are a client of yours. And I know, Kevin, we've talked a lot. I guess when we signed our contract maybe a couple of years ago compared to now, and what changes in the market dictate, hey, well, Charter is only offering 100 a door for the first type of contract that you mentioned, as opposed to they were doing 150 last year. What market, I guess, fundamentals dictate, hey, how much can you get up front before you actually start getting a share of the revenue? Maybe go into more of how that works on that first type of contract, which I cannot think of the name of it, versus the bulk rate.
Yeah, the right of access agreements.
Correct. That's what we have.
Yeah, exactly. And yours made sense because you were going to go in there and you were going to have a high occupancy or high vacancy rate for a while as you started turning them over and fixing up Buffalo Ridge. I think was the one we were. So yeah, so you were going to have a high vacancy rate. So you certainly didn't want to be paying for service where there's a high vacancy. Now you've got a right of access. If we went back to them and said, hey, we want bulk now, they would most likely be more than willing to go to bulk because bulk is the preferred type of service for the cable companies. Because look at it from their standpoint. I'm sending out one bill instead of 100. Not rolling trucks out there. My operational expenses are decreased. My non-pay, my collections, the likelihood that the owner is going to pay versus trying to collect from all these others. Plus, I get to count 100 customers because they're all hooked up instead of just those that choose my service. I have no marketing expenses and all those sorts of things. So they prefer that. So if people are in doubt, I always tell them, well, I've seen cable companies go from, if you've got a right of entry agreement with term left on it, they're willing to go ahead and renegotiate for bulk, but I've never seen them go from bulk with term left on it and go back to right of entry because that's not their preferred agreement. Now, I completely understand why. And if I was them, I would absolutely do the same thing. But yeah, so that is one of the considerations. As far the market dictates a lot. So it's which cable company are you talking to? It's all about leverage, right? I mean, how much leverage do you have versus how much do they have? So if they're the only cable company in there and you've got a small property where you can't really afford to bring in another outside contractor, or the potential losses to them if you said no was small, then you're not going to get nearly as much. And when different competitors come into the marketplace, like when WOW came into Knoxville, or it was actually Knology, and then WOW bought them. But everybody panicked, and it was like, we got to sew up these contracts. We got to get the exclusive right. So a lot of it has to do with competitive nature, who the company is. Certain companies are more generous than others, but even those companies, there can be one market where they're not nearly as generous as they are in another market, and it has to do with how competitive it is. So there's a lot of factors in there, and that's why I always hate to throw out numbers on these podcasts. Like, well, what can I get? What can I get? I'm like, well, there's a ton of factors that go into it, and that's why we don't make promises until we, until we get information gathered.
Yeah, I think the point would be that there's an activity happening on your property already, and that you can go from getting no compensation for it to some compensation for it. So you may be leaving money on the table for something the tenants will be doing one way or another.
Exactly, Greg. And
Yeah.
the other thing is that, I mean, you guys are in the acquisition mode, right? So you guys are buying new properties.
I'm
And
trying.
but I know anytime you guys come up with a new property, it's like, hey, what's the deal with this one? And I'll tell you that some people buy properties, and we found that there's already an agreement in place, but for some reason it didn't show up in due diligence. It was not anything of malicious intent that the other owner's like, oh, I'm not going to tell them about this or anything like that, right? It's just that it didn't show up. It either the owner bought it and didn't know they had it, or they forgot about it, or it wasn't where the other documents were, or the cable companies switched ownership and things like that. But it didn't show up. And we go, and the first thing we do is we ask the cable company, is there an agreement in place? And we found that many times there actually is a valid agreement already in place. But what we can do for the new owner is, if there's like revenue share associated with it, we can make sure that the ownership change the revenue share, because the door fee usually goes with the owner that signed the deal, because it was they're getting it for signing that deal. But the revenue share is paid out typically quarterly, and it goes with the property. So if you're buying a property and there's already an agreement in place, it's imperative for us to notify the cable company, hey, there's a new owner and you got to send a check to a different place. And we do that all the time. And we actually don't even charge for that, because we didn't get the original contract. We're just, based on our relationship and we're looking at long-term relationships, and we know how to do that easier than you know how to do that. Well, let's get us a new W-9 and send it in and have that changed so that you then get that revenue that you're entitled to, because it's your property.
Yeah, this sounds like kind of a set it and forget it type contract, where it doesn't have a lot of hands-on maintenance or follow-up once it's rolling. And correct me if I'm wrong, like, for that assumption is you make the agreement. As an owner, you don't have to do much more after that. On a kind of how does it flow down to the tenant then? Hey, we have this agreement with Comcast. Does your property management team then kind of market that specific product to them at the lease up? They bite on it or not, and the revenue flows based on whatever happens there.
Yeah, you're going to want to have your leasing agent engaged, especially in the event that there is a revenue share, because the revenue share is a sliding scale. And the more residents you have, so let's say you've got 100 units, and if you've only got 30 customers, you may only get 2% of the revenue. If you've got 50, 4%. So not only are you increasing the number of customers you're generating revenue from, but you're increasing the percentage, because they're incenting you to help them do better. So you want to have people engaged, because you're going to make more money for that.
Okay, so it becomes part of your marketing during the lease-up process.
Yeah, move in, and here we recommend Spectrum, we recommend Comcast. Here's how you get a hold of them. Here's what you do. I mean, you're not sitting down and having to take orders and all that kind of stuff, but you're promoting them and only them because they're the only ones paying you revenue. So it's in your best interest too.
Does the tenant still have, they can go to any provider though?
Any provider that you have on site. So when you're signing these deals, you're not signing an exclusive right to serve, you're signing an exclusive right to market. So if there's a phone company and a cable company, they can still choose between either of those because you're not removing anybody. By signing these deals, it's really transparent to the residents. They don't pay any more, even though you're getting a percentage of the revenue. They are locked in. Any municipality. So like when a company is granted a franchise, their rates are throughout that entire franchised area, whether it be Knoxville, whether it be Johnson City, whatever it be, they are the same. They cannot go over a certain rate for anybody in there. So this whole thing would be transparent. The day you sign it, the day before you sign it, and the day after you sign it, to the residents, there's absolutely no difference. They wouldn't know you signed it.
Okay, cool. Could we switch gears to power?
Sure.
And I was looking at your website. We talked about this before we came on, that there's deregulated markets and energy brokers that can be negotiated with to provide power, apparently at less than what the regular market rate is. Is that kind of what goes on?
Yeah, there are, and we've got a guy. So I specialize in the telecommunications piece of the business. I've got another guy who I've got a business relationship who is a specialist in this because, it's too much to be subject matter expert in all those things. So,
sure. Yeah. If you could just loosely speak to, there's opportunity here, and this is kind of how it works.
Well, there is, as long as you are in a deregulated market. So, and that varies, right? So unfortunately, Tennessee, based on Tennessee Valley Authority, there's only one provider.
Yep.
And those rates are regulated by the government. So their view is we're going to hold costs down through regulation. You go to another market, like I live outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and we are in a deregulated marketplace. So I have choices on who I can pick for electric and or gas. And so the state of Ohio has said, we're going to be a deregulated market. We're not going to set the rates. We're not going to put anything on. We're going to let the marketplace dictate what it is. And so when there's multiple providers, it's like when you're driving down the street, where am I going to go to get gas, right? It's $2 a gallon here. It's $2.25 over here. I'm going to the $2. So you can shop that around. And so what our guy does is he takes your most recent bills and uses that to assess whether or not there's an opportunity. The challenge with power, you got to be in a deregulated market where you have choices. And more of the country is regulated than is deregulated.
And the list of deregulated markets happens to be a Multifamily Utility Solutions website.
It is.
You can go there and find out what market you're on and give Kevin a call if you find you're in the.
Yep.
I'm not sure if that red, blue, and green is then deregulated. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, but no, that's a good place to start. And so there are opportunities, but again, it comes down to usage. And each market, so like if you've got a 20 unit apartment complex and you go to Spectrum and say, hey, what can I get for this versus a 200 unit property, they're going to give you more attention on the 200.
Oh yeah, sure.
Obviously the 20. So the same thing holds true with power. So if you've got electric and you don't use that much of it, you're not going to get as good of a savings, right? So if your individual residents pay for their own power and you don't have laundry rooms, but you have laundry in their actual units, and maybe you have all external entrances and you don't have a clubhouse or anything like that, you're not using much.
Right. Yep.
Whereas if you have laundry rooms and a large property and you've got hallways that you're heating and common areas that you're heating and pools in some areas that are heated or whatever, and that usage goes up, then there's the opportunity.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, the same thing. And then if for some reason you are master metered,
Yes,
maybe on an older property,
correct.
doesn't happen a lot, especially at scale, but
Correct.
yeah, there might be something there to
Right. But our guy will look at the invoices, send a recent invoice for all the electric that's used, and be able to determine that.
Mhm.
There's a threshold, but certainly it's about more is better.
Mhm.
More usage, greater the savings. The greater
So
the
on this side of the equation, utilities, energy, whatever you want to refer to it as, is there only a savings opportunity, not necessarily a revenue sharing opportunity by the owners?
Correct.
Okay, but it's still, regardless of who's paying, will
It
help
still impacts your NOI.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, but it can impact your NOI. It can also impact you on a competitive basis with other complexes. If you're able to drive your utility costs down, that should also drive down your RUBS. If you have utility ratio, utility bill back service, if you're billing back only $30 and your competitors are billing back $50 because they didn't go through the effort to lower their overall utility costs to begin with, now you're more competitive to the market because you're keeping the cost down to your tenant.
And I hate to not give answers to questions sometimes, but it's just like when you go to assess different properties and which one you want to buy, you're looking at a lot of different factors that weigh into, is this a property I want to buy? And those same factors in many cases can impact, our ability to generate revenue from a cable contract or save expense from an energy bill. So like you look at each one a little bit different. Oh, this many units, this place, here's what the market has and all that kind of stuff. We have to look at those same things.
Yeah. Hey, it's Greg from Real Wealth Solutions. If you'd like to know more about our passive income opportunities, jump onto realwealth.solutions and hit that schedule a call button. We're always happy to talk about our multifamily and flip projects and to answer any questions you may have. Again, that's realwealth.solutions. We look forward to hearing from you. And now, back to the podcast. When do people engage you? I think probably most of the time it's after they have already bought. But is there enough time in due diligence phase to engage you and say, hey, what do you think can be done with all this due diligence? I mean, because we'll have utility bills at that point. We'll have, hopefully, if there's something to be disclosed related to a cable contract. What kind of guidance can you give, pre-acquisition?
The sooner the better. Earlier in the process, the better. And sometimes because we deal with these companies all the time, we go to them and say, hey, we're looking at this property. They'll be like, well, I can't tell you much because you don't own it, but there's already a contract in place, or there isn't a contract in place, or there's an opportunity, and we can convey that back to the owner. So if they're trying to run their numbers on where can we get it, and what's it look like after, and it's just another piece of information for them to know. And if they know there's a contract, they might press harder for the current owner to provide that contract. And if that current owner, and we've had this situation come up. So somebody was trying to buy a property. We heard back, yeah, there's a contract in place already. But they wouldn't give it to us because we didn't own it, and we weren't the representative of the company that owned it. So we told the potential owner, and they went back to the current owner, and they're like, what do you mean there's a contract in place? We don't know anything about this. So that current owner sent a letter of authorization allowing us to get a copy of it, and we got it so that they had it and so that they knew what they were dealing with. We've also been told, yeah, we can we can do something when your owner acquires it. And, then we're ready to go. And they're signing those deals days after ownership, not months after ownership.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, yeah, controlling the clock. That's often a lot of the opportunity.
Yeah. Would you,
In many
yeah, would
ways.
you rather have
Yeah.
$10,000 today or $10,000 in 3 months?
Mhm. And on the scale side of it, is there a minimum kind of unit count that you like to see? And I'm wondering, what about, scattered units or a portfolio? Like
Mhm.
you might have 200 units in a market, but they're split up between a 20 unit, a 4 unit, a 60 unit, a couple of 12 units. I'm just wondering if you can take a scattered portfolio and leverage that as well as a standalone 200 unit.
Yes, we can. But certainly the preference is largest number of units in one
Oh
location,
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
and then you go down from there. Typically anything less than 20 just isn't factored in at all. And the only time 20 can be is if you've got something larger on the other side to kind of balance that out. They'll take a 20 if you're also offering them a 100, you know.
Mhm.
So they'll look at it as 120. But it all comes down to leverage, right? I mean, if you've got, uh, we go through this all the time. Somebody's got like, well, I've got 12 different properties, and I've got 500 units. Well, they're in different markets with different cable providers. Some of them are with Suddenlink, some of them are with Comcast. Some of them are with Spectrum, in different markets, then it gets spread out. We lose our leverage. We don't have the ability to go to any one of those groups and say, hey, here's what we got. Conversely, we had just done a lot of business in one particular state, and we leveraged the fact that we had multiple owners with large portfolios together. And so, so even though it wasn't the same company, the fact that we had that many had an impact, had a positive impact. So we do that as well. We maintain a database. So we use a database. I've got somebody who manages that for me. And if there's a property, once we get the record of a property, even if there's a contract or no contract, we put it into our database. And if somebody new comes along, and let's say we didn't get anything for it when we first looked into it, if somebody new comes along in that same market, we may pull that one into the mix and say, hey, we've got this new property, but remember we had this other one that we couldn't do anything with at the time. Could we do it if we do something with this other, this new property? So we're always looking for opportunities because we don't get paid if you don't get paid, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's the way our compensation is structured, is we only get paid if you get paid. We believe in win-win. I mean, I don't want you to pay us for not contributing to your bottom line. So we maintain that database, and we will, always look for opportunities. And I may call you up and say, Greg, Darren, remember that property in, Johnson City or Knoxville? Hey, guess what? We've got an opportunity because we picked up a portfolio that's big enough that we might be able to throw that. You guys still want to do something with that?
Nice. So that'd be basically multiple owners together in a package. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but it's not like you have to form any LLC or
Correct.
anything like that. You're all independent, because even within a company, you may have one company but each of their individual things is in different LLC, right? Each property is its own LLC. So
Right.
you're still, the contracts are still going to different, the signature, and in some of them, it may be like, let's say, Darren and Greg own a property together, but Darren and Kevin own a property together. But Kevin needs to be the signator on one, and Greg needs to be the one on the other, but Darren's the common thread there. So we can still put those together, even though Greg's signing one and I'm signing the other, because Darren's the common thread there and has ownership in both. So we look for opportunities like that to figure out a solution, not, just discount it.
Similar to what a lot of property owners do in smaller markets where they have 20 to 40 units and property management is hard to come by. They'll partner with another owner that has the same size portfolio, and then just have one property manager that manages both, and you just split the costs. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
What about, are there any new services, if you will, that maybe you guys are looking at to sort of get ahead of the game and being able to offer to owners? You know, you've got cable, you've got gas, you've got power. Is there anything else that you do offer that you work with or thought about moving forward? What's that landscape look like?
You know, the telecommunications space is just changing so rapidly, right? I mean, when we first started doing these contracts, for example, revenue share, the video service was the where you got the most money, and then you got internet, and you still got some for phone. Now you get virtually nothing for phone, because who uses a landline anymore? Not very many people. And internet has leapfrogged video as the predominant service. So the question becomes, how do we leverage that? Because some people, you know, I mean, many people, I in my house have internet from my cable company, but only internet. And I use Hulu and Netflix and Disney Plus and all that. So the question becomes, how can we somehow have that relationship for internet? And some companies they don't care about any of the video. They just want an internet contract, exclusive internet. And then how can we still make money off video? And so we're looking at some streaming services and trying to see. The problem is the margin on video has just eroded over the years to virtually nothing. There's cable companies out there selling their video service at cost as a loss leader to get your internet business. Because when it first started out, cable TV was over the air signals, charge, you know, $20 a month, and your margin was great. But as they added all these channels, the costs initially weren't anything. But if every one of those channels increases by a penny or two a year, you know, it squeezes your margin, because you can't raise the rates at the same pace that you know, so that has gotten squeezed. And, you know, so we're looking at how do we still make money off that? There's third parties out there that will come in on a bulk basis and run dedicated fiber to your location, and do like Wi-Fi managed networks and things like that. But there again, it's a lot of work for you. The cable companies who already have invested in your property aren't putting new infrastructure in place. So they can typically be a little more competitive on their pricing, because they don't have any investment. They've already captured the return on their investment, their capital investment. So all those things are things that we're looking at and thinking about, and trying to make sure that we're ahead of the solutions. And when somebody calls us, we can, you know, talk about all those things. You know, it's hard to say. I mean, we're just trying to stay up on the news and stay with it, and figure out where the next opportunity is going to be. But I don't have a big one just yet.
Do you guys have a true competitor in doing the exact same thing you're doing?
Well, we like to think.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, there are other companies out there that
no competition.
Yeah, I mean,
Kevin?
Yeah.
No.
But you know, there's other companies out there that do this. Yeah, I mean, but think about how big, I mean, the space is, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Multifamily property owners that have 50 or more units. I mean,
right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's all over. So there's plenty. I don't worry about my competitors, because I figure as long as I'm doing a good job, and our structure, I think, makes sense. We're there for service. We're there to help whenever we can. You know, we look into things, and we're in it with you. You know, I prefer to think that we're the ones that are the best partners, because if you guys make no money, we don't make any money.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can help you with something, I've got a guy in Texas who has 8 properties, and we've done deals on 5 of them, and the other 3 were already in place. But if he has a problem with his courtesy account, or, you know, service issues or anything like that, he's calling me on property that we didn't even, you know, and that's okay, because we're in it for the long term. We want to have an ongoing relationship, and we will provide the service there and put hours into it, whatever's necessary, to make sure that he's satisfied, you know, with us. And I don't no, we just,
Uh,
so yeah, I mean, there's other companies that do this, but honestly, I don't lose
yeah,
sleep or
it was
pay
more of a
much attention to
curious.
that. As long
It was
as I'm
more.
doing what I need to do and establishing a true partnership, I
Right.
have faith that people will continue to look to us.
Well, we can attest that the communication with you guys at Service has been top notch from day one. It was more of a curiosity question more than anything. As you know, we're all about creating relationships and keeping relationships, because I know that both of us have sent you referrals, and we're always pinging you on social media. Contact Kevin, and so it's back and forth. So yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
What about maybe you could just speak broadly about other opportunities in utilities? You mentioned before we started recording, with the pandemic and everything, there was a lot of unknowns about what revenue was going to look like, what collections were going to look like. I think there was generally more attention starting to be given to the expense side of the P&L, which you've been able to benefit from, and I was on a call last week. The same kind of thing is happening on the water side of utilities. There are companies out there that also will analyze your water bills and make sure you're being charged properly, and they can do things with like this company did everything from installation of specific toilets to ongoing Wi-Fi leak monitoring. That's available on the expense side of thing related to utilities. Is there anything else like cell phone towers used to get talked about a lot as an opportunity that is sort of utility related, but I don't know, I'll throw it in your lap. What else is going on in the industry that maybe we can pay attention to?
Yeah, we even though our name is Multifamily Utility Solutions, and while I admit that I'm not a subject matter expert in all utilities, we have colleagues and partner companies, for lack of a better term, I guess, where we refer people to if they're looking for something specific. For example, we were talking about Tyler Brunson from Waste Consultants earlier. So that's another opportunity. If somebody calls me about waste, recycling, removal, his company is the subject matter expert in that. Just like if he gets a call about telecom, he gives them to me, I'm going to direct them over to them, because he'll look at it too. I mean, he needs a little bit larger property or group of properties in a consolidated area than I do to work with, because they're physically going out to all those properties, whereas when we're doing deals, we're not. So that's another resource. We're constantly networking and trying to find. I've just over the holidays, I talked to somebody about cell towers and followed up with them. And then I've got a second one, because these are things when people come to me, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to go find it, and I'm going to go and try and help them, because the more I can help you, the better our relationship becomes. So there are some opportunities for cell tower at least people to talk to who are subject matter experts in that area. Waste removal, water. We've got a relationship now with somebody that does sub-metering. There's also another company that we're looking into that. The way they explained it, and I had one person tell me that this didn't make sense, and several others tell me it did make sense, is that when your water's metered, there's a certain amount of air in the water, and that shows up as usage. And these guys have created a valve, and I could be wrong about this, but this is the way I understand it. But again, I'm not the subject matter expert, so I'm gonna send it over to somebody else. If they insert this valve and they're saying it's legal, it's not, we're allowed to do this, it's just a different valve, it actually compresses it so the usage shows up as less. So we're looking into that. I'm not
That's
100.
fascinating. I mean, yeah, as soon as you
Yeah, I
said, I'm like,
mean,
that kind of sounds like it makes sense that if it's a volume
right? Yeah,
versus, yeah.
it did.
Hmm.
It made sense enough to me to start wanting to investigate it more because, I don't know, maybe I'll get a referral fee, but it's more for helping. If I can bring money to you, but I can also direct you to 3 or 4 other people that can help your bottom line, then we're all in it together and it's a better relationship.
Right. And like I was also just thinking about EVs, electric vehicles, if there will be an opportunity for installing, those kind of stations and coordinating,
Yeah.
that industry, or even just, solar on covered parking type stuff, that kind of infrastructure.
Yep. We've
Um,
got somebody that we talked to about solar. So there's
okay.
we have a solar resource as well. The challenge there is the cost. So I know
Mhm.
enough about this because we've been talking about this for a couple of years. The challenge there is the cost. What he has told me is the ideal time to do solar is when you're
When the
acquiring the
sun's out.
property.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, exactly. Not in Northeast Ohio today. I can
Yeah.
vouch for that. But it is when you're acquiring the property so that you can bake that cost into the acquisition, as opposed to coming back later and trying to get it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've got, but there again, this guy's, I know enough about it to say, here's what I know about it. But if you want to dig deeper, here's the guy you talk to. And so, and that's what we do. I mean, there's a group of us that kind of like has become subject matter experts in each of these different things that can possibly help multifamily property owners. And so, it would be impossible for me unless I hired these guys and bought their companies, which, I guess maybe down the future. But, right now, it would be impossible for me to be a subject matter expert on solar and energy
Sure.
and,
Yeah.
water and all these things. So I appreciate the fact that there are people out there that already do that. So yeah, solar, but then you mentioned the EVs, at a certain point, if you start installing these stations, that's going to impact your electric usage, right? So if they're billed to you instead of the actual unit, then your usage is going to go up, making, and you probably want to do it as an amenity maybe, but making your ability to shop your electric all that much more important because you're going to be using more of it. So
Mhm.
if you could go out, shop your electric, and get a lower rate and put these in so that the savings offsets the extra usage, then you're putting them in for no incremental cost. But it's an amenity that you can offer that the guy down the street might not.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be coming.
I would think so. That's a good
Yeah. In the
point.
next decade or something like that.
Yeah,
There's enough Teslas running around.
exactly.
Huh.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, any and all those things. We it's just we're kind of in it with you guys, and anything we can do to help,
Well, they seem to be, I certainly account for utilities costs when I'm underwriting, but it's not something that I immediately look to achieve a savings on outside of implementing RUBS.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's kind of as far as it goes. The cable hardly comes to mind at all. Usually it's a matter of, hey, no dishes on the roof.
Right.
It's that kind of conversation about cable. Um, and yeah, so some of these things that are not being looked at for more than the usual cursory
Mhm.
reason, you might have the opportunity to talk to a Kevin and see if you got some opportunity. And you operate in all states?
All states, yeah. I mean, not necessarily all markets, because some of these small rural markets, the cable company there just is like, we're the only game in town.
Yeah, there's
We
not
don't
a
pay
lot of
any of this.
opportunity.
There's like some smaller ones, but anymore, any of the major. I mean, we do business with Suddenlink and Sparklight, which used to be Cable One, and Comcast and WOW, and the larger providers, Cox Communications. So we can probably cover, I would say, at least 80% of the US.
Okay, right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't have much more. Darren, you got anything rattling around your head you want to get out?
No, I just think it's great that most of your business, we were talking before we started recording, is done by referrals, and that's just something that you believe in as a human as far as giving back or whatnot. But do you find a lot of time? Well, I mean, it's just like us. We needed to be educated, and I think you've spoken at an event here and there, and you find that's still necessary, or more people know about it in the last 2 or 3 years? It's gotten more knowledge about what services are out there that you actually have, or is it still about the same? You still a certain amount of people just like, oh, never heard of that. What's that about?
Yeah, you know what? We're just seeing this area, multifamily investing, to me, and maybe it's just because I've become more immersed in it, it just seems like there's new people coming in all the time wanting to be multifamily investors. And so, all these new people, we met, like 4 years ago when it was kind of a new thing, and we're just kind of like kicking the tires on it, right? And things like that. And now look at where you guys have grown to. There's more people that are 4 years behind you guys coming in all the time. And I get calls from podcasts and from, other things where people are like, hey, I'm just getting into this. I got a couple of questions. Great. Let's talk about it. I mean, Greg and I at the first event, we probably sat there and talked for over an hour or so. And we basically, look at that evolved into, this longer term relationship. And, it's an investment in educating people. One of our other friends, right? Abraham, right? Anderson. I mean, when we first met, he had like 12 units, and I sat there and I talked to him and explained it to him. A year later, I went to the Jake and Gino event, the second one, and he came up to me like he was like one of the first people I saw, and he's like, hey, I'm about ready to close on a 65 unit. I'm about ready to call you and all that kind of stuff. And, that's because I took the time to, I'm happy to give of my time to help people understand what the opportunity is, because this is a great business to be in.
I know we haven't even talked to you about our other property in Johnson City at length. So
yeah,
stay on the call.
Sounds great. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I think, everybody was kind of riding the wave of multifamily was just crushing it for years on end. And pandemic hit and we all got kind of slapped in the face with pay more attention to the fundamentals. So I think there has been a shift more to the expense side and controlling that. So there may be some real, opportunity to get in touch with Kevin. At least see what he can do for you,
yeah, just call. We talk to people all the time. I mean, I will talk to anybody, and it's an investment in their business, which is an investment in my business.
Absolutely.
And I think we're seeing a turnover from the old mom and pops that didn't, run it necessarily like a business, to people like you guys who are, this is a business and let's do it.
Yeah, it helps you stay competitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially if you got investors involved. You gotta get that free cash flow number as big as you can get it. So
yeah, exactly.
So Kevin, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with you so they can't have that call?
Yeah, it's best to schedule a time so that I can have a blocked out and commit to that time. Kevin at multifamilyutilitysolutions.com. Shoot me an email. Let's schedule some time. Usually block out at least kind of a half hour, but we can usually cover stuff in 15 to 20 minutes and answer any questions you have and put you in touch with the right people if I'm not, and go from there.
Awesome.
Right on. And we'll drop everything in the show notes as usual, your contact information, your sweet headshot, picture of your palace in the background.
There you go.
All right, I'll close it out. Thank you all for joining us here on the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. We appreciate your time. And if you might have somebody in your circle that would benefit from talking to Kevin, or even just hearing this episode, we certainly appreciate you sharing it with them. Until the next time, which will be in about a week, we will see you all later. Thank you.
Guys, thanks so much.